Hi, my name is Benji Eugenio LMT. Ako ay mula sa hanay ng AO sa online school. Ang ating Department of Health Accreditation number is TI-11-10-0016. Ang mga video na mapapanood niyo ay pawang pang classroom use lamang. Maingat nating inedit ito upang sa gayon ang mga ito ay makakatulong para sa inyong paghahanda para sa darating na DOH Massage Licensure Examinations. Sa bandang huli ay kilalanin natin ang mga may akda ng nasabing teaching materials na ating ginamit. Kung kayo man ay may mga mungkahi o suhestyon, maaaring pakilagay lamang sa comment section sa ilalim screen na ito at sisikapin natin na matugunan ang mga ito. Maraming salamat. God bless.
Lymphatic system. Objective: to learn the structure and functions of the human lymphatic system. Within your body, there is a system that functions largely as a drainage network, helping to keep fluids balanced, while also helping to fight against infections. This network, the lymphatic system, works with the circulatory system. Within the lymphatic system, blood enters the tissues through capillaries. At the cellular level, blood pressure causes fluid to pass through the thin capillary vessel walls to become tissue fluid. Tissue fluid differs from the blood plasma in that it contains white blood cells, also known as leukocytes. Most of this tissue fluid returns to the capillary vessels through venules. However, a small amount will not return to the blood capillary system. This part is a clear fluid containing white blood cells and is known as lymph. It will enter the lymph capillaries, which begin as blind-ended tubes that are no more than a single cell in thickness. In addition to carrying lymph, the lymphatic system has additional functions. In the small intestine, lymphatic vessels known as lacteals absorb fatty acids and transport fat into the circulatory system. It produces immune responses through the production of lymphocytes and monocytes. Lymphatic capillaries unite to form collecting vessels, which move along the arteries and veins before emptying lymph into one of the many lymph nodes found in the body. These nodes are small bean-shaped enlargements found at various points, including your neck, armpits, groin, and the walls of the intestines. There are about 600 to 700 lymph nodes in the human body.
The lymphatic system is an efficient, intricate, and vital organ system in your body, but it is often poorly understood. Our bodies have two main circulatory systems for transporting fluid, cells, nutrients, and waste: the cardiovascular, or blood system, and the lymphatic system. They are like two mass transit systems with passengers, routes, and destinations. Both are made up of vessels, the train tracks and roadways, and passengers, the cells, molecules, and fluid. These systems transport passengers from all over the body. The blood system is like a high-speed train, the non-stop express. It carries cells, like red blood cells, platelets, and immune cells, and water, nutrients, and other molecules. The trains depart from the heart, the Grand Central Station, and branch off via smaller and smaller vessels to destinations all over the body. At each destination, trains drop off their passengers at the capillaries, the smallest vessels in the body. At some destinations, passengers get off and deliver nutrients and supplies. At other locations, like the lungs, new passengers, like oxygen, hop on board. Each train returns to the heart to be pumped out to the body again. However, only 85% of the passengers riding the blood system get back on. The other 15% are picked up by the lymphatic system. The lymphatic system is like a high-tech taxi system which helps several important systems: the blood system, the immune system, and the digestive system. First, the lymphatic system returns extra fluid back to the blood system. When passengers are picked up at the lymphatic capillaries, they're called lymph. Lymph is made up of proteins, fats, immune cells, and extra fluid that has leaked out of the blood system, which needs to be returned. These capillaries merge with lymphatic vessels, which join into larger trunks and ducts, which finally drain into the heart, returning the lymph to the blood system. This is the normal journey for fluid in the body, from the blood to the tissues, some to the lymphatics, and back to the blood. Second, the lymphatic system helps the immune system fight infection. On its journey back to the heart, lymph is stopped by many strategically placed checkpoints for the immune system, which helps your body fight infection. These are called the lymphatic organs. They include your tonsils, adenoids, Peyer's patches, hundreds of lymph nodes, and the spleen, which acts like the largest lymph node in your body. The thymus and bone marrow have important jobs as well. At these checkpoints, immune cells look for threats. If a threat is detected, the lymphatic organ calls for help, and extra lymph floods in, carrying masses of immune cells. The increased amount of lymph causes the organ to swell up. After the threat is eliminated, the swelling goes back down. Finally, the lymphatic system helps the digestive system. At the small intestine, nutrients get on the blood system. However, some nutrients, like fat, are too large to get on board and are picked up by the lymphatic system. Since this lymph is rich in fat, it's called chyle. Chyle is affected by the kind of food you eat. For example, a juicy steak makes the chyle much richer in fat and protein compared to a salad. Chyle travels up the central lymphatics, the main central highway of the lymphatic system, up to the heart, enters the bloodstream, and finally travels to the liver, where its large, rich nutrients are digested. Today you learned that the lymphatic system is one of two circulatory systems along with the blood system. It helps return extra fluid to the blood system, helps the immune system fight infection, and helps transport fat and other large molecules for your digestive system.
To figure out what lymph is, let's start with something that we already know: the circulatory system. It consists of your heart, which doesn't look like this. I'm pretty sure you know about this. But since we are not focusing on the heart, let's just keep it this way. Anyways, this heart pumps this oxygen-rich blood through this artery all the way into the blood capillaries. This is where the cells of our body starts removing the oxygen from the blood and starts throwing carbon dioxide back into the blood. and now the blood is deoxygenated because it no longer has oxygen, it has a lot of carbon dioxide, and that's why it's shown in blue. It goes all the way up through this vein into the heart, and then from there goes to purify in the lungs, and then it gets purified, comes back to the heart, and the cycle repeats. That's something we've seen before, right? But now let's talk about something that we haven't seen before, okay? The first thing is, remember that the blood inside the arteries, the vessels that take the blood away from the heart, so this one and this one, they are under pressure, right? Because as the heart squeezes, the blood is under pressure, which means the blood is pushing on the walls of these arteries. And another thing to focus on is that if you were to zoom into these capillaries, so if you were to look at one of those capillaries, then we see that the walls of the capillaries have holes in them. So now think about it. The blood over here is under pressure. That means the blood is pushing on the walls, and the capillary of that wall, and the wall of that capillary has holes in them. What's going to happen? Well, if you thought that due to the pressure, the blood starts oozing out of these holes, then you are absolutely right. Now, we will not call this blood because blood contains plasma, which contains proteins, and then it has RBCs and WBCs and everything, right? Now, what oozes out is just the plasma, all right? RBCs can't ooze out because the holes are too small for RBCs to go out. So RBCs don't ooze out. The plasma comes out with a little bit of proteins. So some small proteins, not big ones, but some small proteins also ooze out along with this plasma. Okay, let me just clean this up a little bit. Okay, so this plasma that oozes out and then fills up this space between the cells, this is what we call the lymph, right? And it's pronounced as lymph with an F over there. So how is lymph different than blood? Well, lymph does not have RBC in it, right? And as a result, lymph, it's pretty much colorless, okay? In fact, the word lymph comes from the Latin, which means water-like. Water-like. And why is it called water-like? Because it is pretty much colorless. And this means wherever these capillaries are present, the plasma will ooze out to form the lymph, right? And capillaries are found all over our body. So you will find this lymph pretty much everywhere inside your body. Okay, so what's the big deal? Why should we care too much about this? Well, first of all, this means that every time blood goes through the capillaries, it will start losing some of its plasma. That's bad because that means the blood will start getting thicker and thicker because it starts losing plasma. And eventually it becomes more and more difficult to circulate it because it's so thick. And that means our cells will not get any oxygen. And I'm pretty sure you know what would that mean. The cells would start dying. Secondly, as this lymph starts getting accumulated within our tissues, it starts pushing on the cells and the tissues will start getting puffed up. And that causes swellings. And that means our organs will start swelling up. And that's one of the reasons why in elephantiasis our limbs swell up. This is because of the accumulation of the lymph over there. Now, before we talk about how our bodies tackle this, I'll tell you what I should think about this. I should think that this is such a bad design. If we don't want the plasma to leak out, then why are there holes present in the capillaries? What a bad design, right? Well, guess what? The holes are necessary because you see, cells aren't only exchanging gases like carbon dioxide and oxygen, which can easily pass through the walls, but they're also exchanging other stuff like nutrients. For example, glucose also, the cells need glucose. They get that from the blood. For that, we need space. They can't go through the walls. They are big, big molecules. They can only go through the holes. And so capillaries need that holes to exchange this stuff. And so since holes are absolutely necessary, there's nothing we can do about this plasma leaking out. And so the big question is, what does your body do about this? Well, thankfully, your body has a separate set of vessels which are called lymph vessels, which clear out this lymph from your tissues. So just like how we have blood vessels and blood capillaries, these are called lymph vessels. So thick ones are called lymph vessels, and the thin ones are called lymph capillaries. So over here, if I were to show you those lymph capillaries, this lymph fluid enters into these capillaries and it clears the lymph out from your tissues. Now, one difference between blood capillaries and lymph capillaries you can immediately see is that blood capillaries connect to blood vessels, right? They're open-ended. But as you can see, the lymph capillaries, they are closed at one end. Can you see that? They're closed. And so I was really curious when I was studying this, how does the lymph just enter into this lymph capillary? It's pretty awesome. Let me show you how. Let me get rid of this leg and let me zoom into one of those capillaries. All right. The cells of these lymph capillaries, as you can see, have a little bit of overlapping structures. That's very important. So now when they are surrounded by this lymph fluid in the tissue, it's the same lymph fluid over here, the fluid starts pressing on the walls. So it starts pressing on the walls. And now look carefully what happens when the fluid starts pressing on the walls, okay? These walls open up. Look at the junction carefully. The walls open up like this. Cool, right? Let me show you one more time. The walls open up like this. And now the fluid enters the capillary. And now if you're wondering, why doesn't the fluid just flow back out through the same opening? Then once the fluid gets inside, it'll start pushing from inside, right? And as it pushes from inside, look at what happens to these walls. They will start closing now. Look carefully, they will now close. So it's like a one-way door. It only allows the fluid in, but doesn't allow it to go out. And that's how these capillaries clear out the lymph from your tissues. So now the next question would be, where do these vessels take that fluid eventually? Where do they put it? Can you guess this? Can you guess where they should put it back? Well, since lymph is basically plasma leaking out from the blood, it makes sense to put it back into the bloodstream, right? And so these lymph vessels eventually connect to one of the blood vessels to recycle it back into our circulatory system. But a question for you would be, do you think we should connect these lymph vessels to an artery or a vein? Can you pause the video and think about which one would you connect it to? All right, let's see. If we were to connect these to an artery, then we would have a hard time trying to force that lymph into the circulatory system because the arteries, inside the artery, the blood is under very heavy pressure, right? In fact, that pressure of the blood would actually force the lymph back out of these capillaries. It might even shatter the walls of the lymph capillaries. It's going to be very bad. So we want to re-enter it somewhere where the pressure is very low. And that is somewhere in the veins. And so the lymph vessels eventually connect to a vein somewhere close to the heart. That's where the pressure is the lowest. And then it re-enters into our circulatory system. And this is how the lymph vessels ensure that we get back the lost blood from the capillaries. And so let's write this down. One of the most important jobs of the lymph vessels is to clear that lymph out. So I'm just going to write clear lymph. So it takes the lymph from the tissues and puts it back into the veins. And so we are done, right? Because your blood is regaining the lost plasma from the capillaries, right? Well, not yet. Not quite, okay? And the reason is, what if your lymph vessels start picking up something unwanted? Like say, for example, your tissues are infected by some pathogens, like say some bacteria. Then when the lymph enters into these vessels, even the bacteria might start entering over there. And then these bacteria might enter into your bloodstream. You don't want any bacteria in your circulatory system. That's going to be pretty bad. So what to do? Don't worry. Your lymph vessels are awesome. They have security points all over them. Okay? These are called lymph nodes. Let me just write that down. Lymph nodes. And they have a lot of WBCs over there. WBCs are like police, all right? So when the lymph enters into these nodes, if there are any unwanted stuff like bacteria, the WBCs are going to kill it. This will make sure that no unwanted stuff enters your bloodstream. It's pretty cool, right? And so you see, these lymph vessels also help in killing unwanted stuff from your body. So they also help in immunity. So they help in immunity. That's pretty cool. And guess what? If any of your lymph vessels pick up a lot of bacteria, then a lot of WBCs will gather in that lymph node, and that node will now swell, which means swollen nodes are an early indication of infections. And that's what the doctors are checking for when they are feeling your neck. It turns out there are a lot of these nodes near your neck and your ears, and so they touch that and see if any of those are swollen. If they are swollen, good chance there is an infection somewhere. Now, before we wind up, another important job that your lymph vessels have is to transport fat into your bloodstream. So I'm just going to write transport fat for short into your bloodstream. And what I mean by this is, imagine you have your small intestine somewhere over here. All your food gets digested and then they come out of the small intestine, and most of the nutrients can directly enter into the capillaries through these holes. And that's how the nutrients enter your bloodstream, and then they are circulated to all the cells. But the digested fats which come out of your intestine are just too big to enter into these capillaries. So they can't directly enter the bloodstream. So they are again picked up by the lymph vessels or the lymph capillaries. Then they go through the lymphatic system and then they reach the bloodstream. And so that's how the fat enters your bloodstream, through the lymphatic system. So what did we learn in this video? We talked about the awesome lymphatic system of our body, which consists of the lymph nodes, and the lymph vessels. The lymph is basically the plasma that leaks out of your capillaries due to blood pressure. This lymph is picked up by these lymph vessels, which recycle it back into our circulatory system through the veins. And the lymph nodes act like security to make sure that no pathogens enter our bloodstream. And finally, the lymph vessels found near the small intestine help in transporting these digested fat into our bloodstream as well.
Lymph means clear water in Latin, and it describes the fluid that flows through the lymphatic vessels and lymph nodes, which make up the lymphatic system. The three major roles of the lymphatic system, the reason we need it in the first place, are that it returns fluid from the tissues back to the heart, it helps large molecules like hormones and lipids enter the blood, and it helps with immune surveillance to keep infections from running amok. So let's take a closer look at lymph and where it comes from. The blood in the arteries is under a lot of pressure because it needs to reach every little nook and cranny of the body. Those arteries branch out into narrower and narrower arteries, and then arterioles until finally it gets to the capillaries, which have walls that are only 1 cell thick and are slightly porous. Red blood cells are too big to fit through the capillary pores, but small proteins like albumin and fluid can make it through.